Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. So I wanted to cover this very briefly. I know that Clownfish TV did a video on it. Their videos are great as always. But I just wanted to tackle this very briefly about Sesame Street. So apparently there was this tweet sent out by NBC Black, right, or NBC BLK, saying Sesame Street has two new Muppets, a black father and son, in an effort to help children understand racial literacy. Okay. Well, first of all, as a brown skinned biracial person who is not of, let's say, immediate white descent, remember, black on one side, Native American on the other, white people are in the family somewhere, but not immediate, right? So, what exactly is racial literacy in today's age? What is that? Because as I've said in many a video, the black experience, however one defines that, is not a universal thing. We are not a monolith, right? What in the world is racial literacy? The experience of, say, a Nigerian born and raised in Africa and my experience as a New Yorker are going to be two entirely different things. The experience of a rich black person, say Oprah, right, is going to be quite different than the experience of a black person who is so poor that they are living on the street. Right? So what exactly is racial literacy? And does racial literacy apply to other races that are not African American? Right? Does that apply to whites? Does that apply to Asians? Does it apply to Hispanics? Does it apply to people myself, people who are multiracial, right? So what exactly is this? What about Jewish people, right? Is that a religion? Is it a culture? Is it a race? Is it both? Is it neither? Like, how do we define what racial literacy is? Number one, especially when we have to explain this now to children. Because remember, Sesame Street is a children's program. It wasn't a children's program I personally was fond of as a kid. I didn't like it. I didn't like Barney. I didn't like PBS at all. But my brother did, and I know that this type of stuff is important to children and to people. So my question is, if you're going to create this father-son duo, and you're going to make them black, right, to help children understand racial literacy, well, you have to define that. And then I would imagine in time you have to expand upon that because guess what? Blacks are not the only race in America. But let's continue. In the promo, Elmo asks why Wes's skin is brown. His dad Elijah explains how the color of our skin is an important part of who we are. Okay, first things first. Wouldn't this be better tackled if you had actual? Because I remember Sesame Street has actual human characters on the show that the Muppets interact with. Wouldn't it make more sense to have an actual father and son duo, right? Explain what their life is like and how, in a way, children can understand, if you must do this in a way kids can understand, how their skin tone impacts how they go about life in the world, wherever it is that they live. Why do you need Muppets for this? To my understanding, the point of the Muppet characters is that they're supposed to be, well, not human, not normal. Elmo's not human. Big Bird is not human. The Count's not human. Oscar the Grouch is not human, right? They're not meant to be normal like us. Even the most normal ones, like Bert and Ernie, right? They don't necessarily look normal. That's what you have the real world, the real life actors for. So why in the world do we need a black father and son Muppet duo? If you're gonna do this, in my opinion, it should be an actual black father and son, right? Or have a celebrity, say like a LeBron James, who I think has been on the show, have him come on the show with his son Bronny, right? And talk about what the black experience is like from their perspective, which naturally is going to be very different than the black experience for many black people in America because LeBron's effing rich, which means that his son is also going to grow up pretty effing rich, right? So he's going to have a lot of advantages via his father that he would not have because, again, who he's related to. But here's the thing. It says here that Elmo asks why Wes's skin is brown. Well, here's what I'm asking. Here's what Gina's asking. Why would Elmo care? Elmo has seen brown skinned people. He interacts with the humans. He has seen, like, what's her name? Maria? And there are other little kids on the show, and there are other adults. He's seen that. He's seen brown skinned people on Sesame Street before. Plus, he exists in a world where he himself is red furred, right? Oscar the Grouch is green, right? He has green fur, skin, whatever the heck it is. The Count's like a lavender, right? Snuffleupagus is like a purple. They have Big Bird is yellow, right? So they have all these different colored Muppets. So why in the world would Wes and his father being brown? I mean, isn't what is it? Ernie, isn't he kind of brownish, reddish brown? So why would this surprise Elmo? Why would Elmo be surprised? I know Elmo's meant to be, forever young in a sense, right? So it's always meant to be young and asking questions that a kid would ask. But even in this context, in this universe, it doesn't make any sense for Elmo to be surprised and to be asking why Wes's skin is brown. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, and here's another thing. We're going to talk about now skin tone and how skin tone is a part of who we are. Well, ah, well, if Elmo is red, is Elmo offensive to Native Americans? Because Native Americans have been referred to as Redskins? Is Elmo bad? That's my best attempt at Elmo. I apologize if your ears are now bleeding. But seriously, if we're gonna play this game, are we now gonna cancel Elmo? Because I remember back in the day, was it '98? I think it was the Christmas season of '98. Everybody and their mother wanted that Tickle Me Elmo doll, right? That thing was huge. People were literally like stampeding, trying to get in the stores, killing each other and fighting each other over this stupid toy, right? But that's to me that's the logical conclusion when you have this overemphasis on race. You now start looking at everything, right? Everything through this racial lens, and now everything is potentially offensive, right? They better hope that some Native American coalition doesn't come up and suddenly go, Elmo bad, Elmo red, Elmo offensive, right? The Washington Redskins lost their name, and now they're the Washington football team. Look, I'm one of the ones who's actually quite happy that they lost the name because that Redskins are racial slur and they never should have had it in my personal opinion. But I never wanted them to just be called the Washington baseball team. Sorry, football team. The Washington football team. That is almost worse. Almost worse, right? So I just don't. I'm not against them wanting to help educate kids on, like, different cultures and all that. Sesame Street's always been very progressive, right? Even since it started in the late '60s, I think it was. And they've had plenty of instances where they've tackled social issues of the day and tried to make them easier for kids to understand. In fact, I looked up some articles online, and some of the articles, right? Some of the articles mention that, for example, Sesame Street tried to tackle divorce back in the early 1990s by making Snuffleupagus the child of divorced parents and talking about how his dad's moving out of a cave and into a new cave and how heartbroken he is, but they ixnayed it then, and then years later they introduced the character of Abby Kadabi, right? And she comes from, a divorced home. The episode is called Little Children, Big Challenges, Divorce, right? So there's that. They've tackled that. They've tackled HIV and AIDS, right? In 2002, they tried to introduce an HIV positive character called Cami, right? Or Kami, I don't know, who was designed to promote tolerance and reduce the stigma the stigmas associated with AIDS and HIV, right? And she's a furry yellow 5-year-old Muppet who contracted the disease HIV as a result of a tainted blood transfusion she received as an infant, and her mother would have died of AIDS. Right? They tried to introduce this in the South American version of Sesame Street, and the South American version was not happy about it. Right? Apparently, the Traditional Values Coalition stated that the introduction of an HIV-infected Muppet on Sesame Street is problematic because HIV is spread primarily by homosexuals and bisexuals in the U.S. It's likely that an HIV-infected Muppet would be used to teach tolerance and acceptance of homosexuals in to the preschool Sesame Street audience. In effect, it would be propaganda to normalize homosexuality in our culture. So they weren't exactly open to it, and apparently they either did not know or completely overlooked the fact that the character that the HIV positive Muppet of Kami, I don't know how you say it, would have gotten a HIV via a blood transfusion, not sexual activity. So her acquiring the illness would have nothing to do with sex because it's a children's show. But of course, everything and everyone's got an agenda, and so the Traditional Values Coalition in South Africa, leaned on the um, sexuality uh, argument, right? Now it says that they never intended to introduce the character um, in the U.S. But I do remember as a kid, I think they had, if not a character, then they at the very least had a few episodes or segments, because I remember seeing it or hearing about it, that dealt with HIV and AIDS, and tried to bring down the stigmas that existed at that time, because it was such a big thing, right? And so many people still at that point were dying, right? So and I remember this, HIV trying to, I guess, pull down the stigmas of people who had HIV a lot in media, and even when I was in school, they would talk about HIV and how you couldn't catch it, you couldn't get it through casual contact. Like if you just shook someone's hand, like you weren't going to catch it, right? That basically you would have to get a blood transfusion or share a needle or have sex, right? It had to be this very intimate contact to get HIV and AIDS, right? Being in the same room wasn't going to give it to you, right? Or if you drank from the same cup or whatever, you weren't going to catch it, right? So I remember back then, even as a little kid, just this very strong media push in general to bring down the stigmas uh, surrounding HIV and AIDS and the people who had it, right? So I remember fairly well that that Sesame Street was a part of that media push to pull down and break down the stigmas associated with people who had HIV and AIDS. And I found this insider article online. Of course, all of this is linked in the description, where it talks about 11 controversial moments in the show's history, and I'm going to share a few of them from the article, right? So, the one of the first ones that it brings up, right, is the fact that they had a character in the 70s called Roosevelt Franklin, who was the first black Muppet on Sesame Street, who was accused of perpetuating negative stereotypes about black children and was removed from the show in 1975. So, technically speaking, right, Wes and his father Elijah are not the first black Muppets. Apparently, this Roosevelt Franklin character is, and looking at an image of him, he's red skinned. So I would have been like, what is he, Native American? What is this? But apparently, and he has a basketball in hand, so they were leaning on stereotypes. But to be fair, stereotypes are based in truth, and we African Americans love our basketball. But it says here, Roosevelt Franklin was a main character on Sesame Street from 1970 to 1975 and was the first black Muppet to appear on the show. Franklin was later removed from Sesame Street after parents criticized the character for promoting a harmful stereotype that black children were rowdy and a bad influence to other children. while Roosevelt also taught lessons on African culture and geography during episodes. His bad behavior and regular visits to after school detention ultimately led to his departure in 1975, right? So they already had a character who was sort of filling this role back in the 70s, and they nixed him because parents felt. I have no idea if this character is actually as bad as the article says he was. I mean, being a rowdy child is not unique to African Americans. Maybe he's just a rowdy kid who just happened to be a red-skinned black Muppet. But still, they ixnayed this character who served more or less the same role as these two back in the mid 70s. So who knows how long this father and son duo, who should be actual people anyway, are going to last, right? But then they have others, right? Apparently, Snuffleupagus was just a figment of Big Bird's imagination until 1985, the year of my birth. And then he was revealed to the rest of the cast to be real after criticism that other characters not believing Big Bird would silence childhood victims of sexual abuse, right? So they decided to, I guess, canonize Snuffleupagus and make him real, right? And then there are other ones, like for example, the actor who played Mr. Hooper or Mr. Hooper died in real life, and the show wrote the character's death into an episode. Right, and as I mentioned, they tried to introduce the character of Kami as the first HIV positive Muppet on the South African version of Sesame Street back in '02. Due to heightened concerns about the growing rates of childhood obesity in the U.S., they tried to get Cookie Monster to go on a diet in '05. I remember that push, and I remember how it was not received well. Because why would the Cookie Monster care? Seriously, why would the Cookie Monster care? He's not human. Use one of the human characters to like put that message out. It's a good message, but Cookie Monster just wasn't the good um, promoter for it. Right? He wasn't the right character to use. Right, and then apparently the Israeli version of Sesame Street introduced Ma Ma Maboob or Mabab. I have no idea how you say it. An Arab Israeli Muppet who spoke Hebrew and Arabic as a response to the growing Israeli Palestinian conflict, right? So they introduced that. Apparently, for some odd reason, back in '09, they used Oscar the Grouch to take some shots at CNN and Fox News. Why you would use a children's show and use my favorite character from said show to take shots at news stations is beyond me. Right, and then let me see what else. Oh, then of course the entire saga, which is the questionable nature of the relationship between Bert and Ernie. Right? Why can't they just be the odd couple? Why can't they just be little kids who are friends and they just happen to be very different from each other personality wise? I don't understand why they have to push this whole they're or at least fans of the show, certain fans of the show do. Oh, they're like really gay and everything. It's like they're children's Muppets. Why are we going there? Right, but my point in all this is that Sesame Street tackling real world issues isn't new. And I think for the most part that their heart at the very least is in the right place when they try to tackle these things. I just don't think in this particular case this is the right way to go about it. Now, as this tweet says here, right, or rather this quote tweet, it says, so their skin color is important, not who they are. Racial literacy sounds a lot like racism with extra steps. A backslide to the 1950s. I agree. I'm trying to be charitable with this, but I do agree that this is a backslide. The more I hear about anti racism, the more racist it comes across to me. And keep in mind, I grew up with media like this, and media that was very diverse and was very open about diversity. X-Men, Gargoyles, Captain Planet, the various fighting games I played growing up. I mean, like the character selection screen for like Street Fighter 2 is just the world. Like literally, you see like this tiny little world map, and every time you have to fight a different character, it goes to a different country, right? You have Ryu, who's from Japan. You have Ken, who's from America, right? You have Chun Li, she's Chinese. You have uh, Dalsum, right, who's an Indian yogi, right? You have Spain. How many Spanish characters are actually in video games? Not many, right? You have Thai fighters in Sagat, right? And of course, that's just a small sampling, right? You have the Brazilian Blanca, you have the Russian, or from the Soviet Union, and then from Russia, in Zangief, right? And just more and more characters that have come from different parts of the world as Street Fighter has gone on, and Tekken and Mortal Kombat and a whole bunch of other stuff that I grew up watching. So diversity was and has been a constant feature and factor in my life. So I don't quite understand this racial literacy push when Sesame Street's always been about diversity, right? I just don't quite understand their goal or the way they're trying to approach it here, right? And as I wrote here, are they going to add Asian Muppets now due to the massage parlor shootings? I know Sesame Street has always tried to take real world issues and explain them to kids, but this isn't the way to do it, Chief. And that's pretty much how I feel about it. I want to be charitable and believe that it's well intentioned. But something well intentioned does not always mean that it's going to have the positive outcome that you want. As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I'm hoping that they will rethink this, in particular, rethink this idea of racial literacy, because that's the part that bugs me the most. Like, what is that? How do you define that? Okay, because we're all being brainwashed enough in one way or another, and I personally am tired of this overemphasis and overfocus on race, which is causing nothing but harmful racial rhetoric and more racial divides. I want to come together. We should be coming together, not demonizing each other and just becoming further apart. But again, that's just me. So that's it for the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Have a good weekend. For some, the weekend's already started. For others, we have one more work day, and then we can finally do whatever it is we plan to do. I plan to sleep most of the weekend. So I'll see you guys around.